In a quiet town where bias and injustice thrived in the shadows, two officers known for their prejudiced ways thought they had just made another easy arrest. Their target? A black man who, in their eyes, had no business walking through their neighborhood. They dragged him into the courtroom with smug confidence, believing this was just another routine case that would be over in minutes. But what unfolded next would shatter their careers and leave everyone in stunned silence. Officer Travis Mills and his partner, Darren Colton, had a reputation, one built on intimidation and racial profiling. That day, when they saw a black man walking through a part of town they deemed off-limits, they didn't hesitate. They pulled over, sirens blaring, and stepped out of their squad car as if they had just caught a fugitive. "Hey you, hands where we can see him," Travis barked. The man complied, his expression unreadable. He didn't argue, didn't resist. He had seen this scenario play out too many times before. Darren smirked. "What are you doing around here? You don't belong, buddy." The man remained silent, his steady gaze locked on the officers. "You hear me?" Travis snapped, stepping closer. "What's your name?" Still, the man said nothing. That only fueled their aggression. Without another word, Travis yanked his arms behind his back and slapped the cuffs on, tightening them just a little more than necessary. "You're under arrest," Darren said with a grin. "For what?" the man finally asked, his voice calm. Travis chuckled. "We'll figure that out later." They shoved him into the back of the police car, exchanging glances of amusement. To them, this was just another day, another moment to remind someone of their so-called place. When the case reached the courtroom, Travis and Darren walked in confidently, expecting a swift process. They had done this countless times before, and they were certain of one thing: no one would question them. The judge entered, and the courtroom fell silent. The man they had arrested sat at the defendant's table, composed and unreadable. Travis stood up to speak first, eager to recount how they had removed a potential threat from the streets. "Your Honor, we found this individual wandering through an area known for..." He didn't get to finish. The judge held up a hand. "Before we proceed, I believe it's only fair to introduce the accused." The officers exchanged confused looks. Why was there such a formal introduction for a routine case? The man stood up. He adjusted his suit jacket, straightened his posture, and then, in a voice that carried authority, said, "I am Jordan Hayes, the newly appointed chief of police." The silence that followed was deafening. Travis and Darren's faces drained of color. The room shifted, the balance of power now resting entirely in the hands of the man they had wrongfully detained. "You arrested your own boss," the judge stated, barely masking their disapproval. Murmurs filled the courtroom. Journalists in the back scrambled to take notes, their pens moving furiously across paper. Travis swallowed hard. Darren's jaw tensed. This wasn't supposed to happen. Jordan Hayes turned to face the two officers. "Gentlemen, do you remember why you arrested me?" Travis opened his mouth, but no words came out. Jordan nodded. "That's what I thought." He turned to the judge. "These officers detained me without cause, mocked me, and assumed my guilt before even asking for my identity." The judge let out a slow sigh. "Officers Mills and Colton, do you have any justification for your actions?" Darren cleared his throat, trying to regain some control. We believe there was reason to investigate." Jordan raised an eyebrow. "Reason? Or bias?" Darren had no answer. Travis clenched his fists. He had always believed his badge gave him power, control. But now, standing before the very man they had humiliated, that badge felt like a weight dragging him down. Effective immediately, the judge announced, "Officers Mills and Colton are suspended pending an investigation." The officer's world collapsed in that moment. Jordan leaned in slightly, his voice just loud enough for them to hear. "You thought you were untouchable. You thought no one would hold you accountable. But the system is changing. And so is leadership." Travis and Darren had spent years getting away with their behavior, believing their authority would always protect them. But today they learned the hard way. True power isn't about control. It's about justice. And justice had just caught up with them. The two officers stood frozen, their faces drained of color as the weight of their mistakes settled in. For a moment, The entire room was silent, the air thick with tension. They had spent years abusing their authority, acting as if their power was absolute. But now, with just one sentence, everything they thought they controlled had shattered. The man they had arrested, the one they had mocked and humiliated, wasn't just another suspect. He was their new boss. Officer Greg Lawson's jaw tightened, his fingers twitching as he struggled to process what he had just heard. His partner, Ethan Moore, took an uneasy step back, his confidence evaporating. "You," Greg stammered, his voice cracking. "You're the chief?" The man, now revealed as Marcus Tate, the newly appointed chief of police, folded his arms, his expression unreadable. "That's right," he replied calmly. "And you two have made one hell of a mistake." Ethan let out a dry laugh, clinging to the last shreds of denial. "This has to be a joke," he said, shaking his head. "There's no way." Marcus took a step closer, his gaze locked onto them with an authority that cut through their panic. "I was sworn in yesterday," he said, his voice steady. "I came here to bring change, to clean up this department. And you just gave me my first case." Greg and Ethan exchanged a look, their minds racing for a way out. Just minutes ago, they had been so sure of themselves, so confident that no one would ever challenge them. But now, for the first time, they saw the truth. They weren't in control anymore. They weren't invincible. They were nothing. The silence in the room was suffocating as Marcus continued. "You didn't arrest me because I committed a crime. You arrested me because of the color of my skin. You assumed I didn't belong here, and you acted without cause. And now, you're going to face the consequences of your actions." Greg's hands shook as he reached for his radio, desperate to call for backup. Anything to regain control of the situation. "Don't," Marcus warned, his voice firm. "There's no covering this up. You lost that option the moment you put those handcuffs on me." Ethan's confidence had completely crumbled. His mouth opened as if he wanted to argue, but no words came. He knew there was no excuse. Marcus turned away, heading for the door, but paused just before stepping out. He glanced back over his shoulder, his expression cold. "You're both finished," he said. "And trust me, the entire department will know exactly what you've done." With that, he walked out, leaving the two officers standing there in stunned silence, their world crumbling around them. News of the incident spread like wildfire. Within hours, Internal Affairs launched a full investigation. The evidence was undeniable: body camera footage, witness statements, and the undeniable fact that Greg and Ethan had arrested their own police chief without any cause. The department, once comfortable in its silence, was now forced to confront its own corruption. This wasn't just about two officers who had taken things too far. It was about an entire system that had allowed them to believe they were untouchable. For Marcus Tate, this was more than a personal victory. It was a message. Power did not belong to those who abused it. Justice was no longer something that could be ignored. And no one, no matter their title or badge, was above the law. The officers who once believed they were invincible had finally learned the harshest lesson of all. Accountability had caught up with them,